APEC Secretary General was there, 13 ministers of energy in London. The situation has not changed from then to now in Africa. So this issue discussion of today is very important, that we all look at it and try to contribute and see how we can find a solution to it. I also have with me here a very good friend and a long-time partner. Her name is Miss Habi Nahal. She's the founder of Nahal Group, based in the UK. And she will tell you a lot as we go on. So, Mr. Jeffrey, would you like to tell the audience what you have been doing to at least contribute to the development of energy in Africa?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Moderator. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much to Pace University for hosting us, and KMO for putting all this hard work into gathering us all today. As the moderator said, my name is Jeff Krilla. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but I work for a company that has been exploring African energy for the last several decades. It's most notably in Ghana, where we helped unlock the Jubilee field and discover oil back there, I think 15 years ago. We both have some experience there. And most recently in Senegal and Mauritania, where we found a natural gas field back in 2015. And we've been working with our partner BP to produce that gas. But I think one of the reasons that this topic is so poignant, and there's several of them, this week when the UN is meeting, the UN General Assembly or UN high-level meetings are taking place, is because Africa is very much in the mix in terms of climate change, the climate change discussion. And it's for two reasons. One is Africa is disproportionately affected by climate change. The impact is felt dramatically across the continent, especially in the Pan-Sahel region. And climate change is real, man-made climate change is real, and we all need to recognize that. But at the same time, Africa is not really to blame for climate change. Africa has a very, very small, minuscule amount of carbon emissions globally, and that has become an issue as Africa is looking to develop its energy assets to increase electrification and energy output. So today I'm interested in talking a little bit about climate change, a little bit about what we call the just energy transition, and then about energy poverty. But it's a good news story, actually, I would say, because of a lot of the things that are going on in the continent. So I'm going to start with the good news, and then we can happily pivot back to some of the challenges that exist. Africa is on the move. I've been going to conferences that say Africa is on the move for my entire 30-year career, but it is absolutely true, and the opportunities there in the energy sector are significant. I've met at least a few Senegalese in the room today, and I'm very excited to be working there. We've got a president, Macky Sall, who not only understands energy, because he has an energy background, but he's helped lead his country to take advantage of these opportunities and be able to grow from it. His plan, Senegal Emergent, has helped take that energy that will come online and really build out the infrastructure. Has anyone here been to Dakar in the last 5 years? Great. I mean, the growth has been explosive and fantastic. And it's great to be part of that, and it's great to see the direction that it's going. So this natural gas field, I would say a year ago, I was getting a lot of our partners, both the Senegalese, BP, and Cosmos, were getting a lot of pushback. Because natural gas, the transition fuel, is not renewable. We definitely see it as a pathway to renewables, but it is something that has been under scrutiny, especially in the United States and West Europe. Now, one of the hypocrisies is such a strong word, but one of the double standards that I've seen is around the issue of energy security. In Africa, we need three things. We need energy security, we need affordable energy, and we need clean energy. And gas is a pathway to all of those things, but I would say the energy security piece was not properly appreciated until the Russians invaded Ukraine. And suddenly Europe started dealing with their own energy security, and suddenly issues of energy became less important than issues of energy security. Now that is, this is a unique example, but as an Africanist, I was very, I'm very passionate about the fact that Africa should not be held to different standards than anywhere else in the world. And the opportunity of West Africa, Senegal, Mauritania, to be able to tap into these natural resources and to make them national resources is indisputable. And to me, something that's going to dramatically change those two countries in the future. So I'm happy to continue. I think we're going to have a number of questions and answers. I also want to listen to my very interesting co-panelist here. But I would say Africa is in a very exciting place. I can talk more than about Senegal and Mauritania, although I know we've got a number of Senegalese, so I'm always happy to talk about that in particular. But thanks so much for having me here today. I look forward to fielding all the questions that come up in our discussion and meeting some of you as well.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey, and thank you for the very good presentation, and particularly bringing us to the point that many African countries have seen the natural source of gas and converting it to national assets. There will be room for questions. So just keep your questions, we'll come back to you. As we listen to Abby. Abby, would you want to?
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I arrived on Monday from London, and New York at this time is incredible with its energy and New Age Week. So thank you again for the organisers, especially Chemo, for making this happen. So by way of introduction, my name is Abby Nahar. I've spent the majority of my career in Africa and the Middle East, West Africa in particular, Ghana, Nigeria, and Angola. And in fact, my panelist was working for Cosmos and I was working for Tullow Oil. We were actually partners for the Jubilee oil field. So I think since the ethos and the subject matter is very much transitioning, as well as kind of green energy and opportunities in Africa. As a contract specialist, my job is very much to look at the operational specifics of oil and gas and oil and energy activity. In particular, there's a subject matter, I look after local content. So as you know, any opportunity in Africa as a whole, right now the big topic on agenda is local content. How much does local participation actually go on to hydrocarbon activity? So I know that you see a lot of these big major oil and gas companies coming into Africa and looking at oil and gas discoveries, so maybe offshore or onshore. But there's a large kind of operational, commercial, administration piece that goes on behind that, which is what us and lawyers and tax people have to get involved in. But for me, I'm very optimistic with what's happening right now in Africa. As my panelists, just to reiterate, it is the new kind of place to do business, and it's what we call in London, it's a new title this year, it's called Final Frontier. So any conference that you go to right now in London, everyone says, oh, it's Final Frontier, Africa's a Final Frontier. As far as I'm concerned, it's always been, yes, absolutely. And it's always been something of a subject matter, and when it comes to opportunities, not just in oil and energy, mining and culture and the arts. So I think we're at a critical time right now, because the last 5 years, look, as an industry, we've gone through a complete transformation. We've had to deal with COVID, we've had to deal with the implementation of blockchain, and we've also had to deal with crypto as well. So you've got lots of kind of outside activities influencing the oil and gas industry. But I guess I'm here just to tell you that, look, there's a hell of a lot of opportunities in Africa, but I think jointly with collaborative partners, we should explore. And, I'm happy to answer any of the questions you guys here throw at us. We're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Abby. You talked about local content. I believe most countries are practicing this local content area, right? Because what we discovered initially is that most of the foreigners who came into Africa saw opportunities and took advantage of the opportunities, and still kept the Africans in darkness. So many of the countries in Africa have created what they call local content agency, where a percentage of whatever investment, whatever job must be done and by the local people, right? And you want to tell us more about local content because I know you are very familiar. You have participated in local content before.
So it's quite interesting. So local content is very much in definition, it's the local participation that any international coming into a country has to legally abide by in their contracts. So for example, an international oil and gas company, an operating company, when they're coming into a country, they want to negotiate with the government and say, okay, what part of that percentage would you like to be local participation? So it could be 20%, 30% or 40%, and then that category is then kind of filtered down into subject matters, engineers, teachers, educators, etc., etc. So it's a very complex strategy that goes into local content. So local content isn't new, it's been around for many, many years, I think since the discovery of oil and gas. Each country has its own specific legislation that supports oil and gas or oil and energy activity in country. So usually when an IOC or an international oil and gas company goes into a region, they will usually sit down with in-country lawyers on both sides and say, okay, how do we make this contract work? How do we make it beneficial for both parties, commercially kind of viable for both sets? And then what ends up happening is part of that contract, quite a large part of that contract emphasises on local content. So part of that could be, educating, putting locals onto graduate programs, and it could be participation, all at different levels of different sectors. So I guess from the operational perspective, our job is to ensure that these kind of quotas are implemented into contracts. So it's not just a simple case of an oil and energy company coming into a country saying, thank you very much, I'll take your natural reserves and I'll leave. We're no longer playing that game anymore. It's a bit more heartfelt, and oil and gas companies over the last 15 years have done very, very well on their local content agendas, and especially companies like Cosmos, Tullow Oil, and Shell and BP. They've done a considerable turnaround with regards to what they actually put into the country from a CSR perspective. That's corporate social responsibility. And I think to support local content, a lot of ministers and a lot of local governments have supported the effort as well, because I think we have the tendency to say, okay, let's ask, all the onus should be on the kind of oil and gas companies or the big operators because they have the money. But the truth of the matter is, it's one hand can't clap. You need to have just as much support in country as you do with the majors. So I think really the transition is happening. I've seen it, especially as an advisor, that a lot more people are conscious about local content. How are we going to support locally the kind of region that we're operating in? So I feel very passionate about it because I've been working on it for the last 15 years. So that's my thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jeffrey, do you want to tell us your real life experience of local content is Senegal?
Absolutely. And I will thank you for that local content 101 explanation, because it's not always as understood as it should be, because it is such a critical piece for the host governments and for the host community. One of the things that we've learned over the years is we're in a highly technical area, offshore oil and gas. So you come into a country that has no history of offshore oil and gas, and it's very difficult to find individuals that have the technical expertise to basically go offshore, work in an oil platform, work in a floating production facility. Even in a country as sophisticated as Senegal, it was, in many cases, the early local content is rather rudimentary. It's providing transportation services, meals, things that are very basic, in the hopes that as the country increases its level of technological acumen around an industry, they can contribute more. And I will say this is a way that Senegal was very forward-leaning. President Sall encouraged both partners, BP and Cosmos, to work together with the government to create the Macky Sall Institute for Petroleum Studies. Now, I'm sure there were Senegalese, the Senegalese diaspora was all over the world. I would say there's no shortage of Senegalese expert engineers working in Total and working in different places that could come home and help add their expertise to this project. But long term, it was important for those fundamental STEM studies to be highlighted at a very high level, and Cosmos being the government effort to create studies will be able to create generation after generation of petroleum experts that will help us tap into these gas reserves and get Senegalese technical expertise at the table, which for me is an amazing story of local content, really local content working. I would say in the short term, in addition to sort of more rudimentary local content efforts, this find is about 100 kilometers offshore. And because of the strong seas in the Atlantic, the idea was, to simplify this, basically to pipe the natural gas to a facility about 8 kilometers offshore and to put a production facility there in these floating vessels. Now, unfortunately, the sea is still very rough there, so the engineering marvel that was created was to create a massive breakwater. And this breakwater would be the effect of an artificial man-made island, and behind it, the ships would sit and they would produce, they would extract the natural gas, they would create the LNG, liquefied natural gas, that would be exported, and then also connect by pipeline to both Mauritania and Senegal to provide domestic use. The reason I mention this effort is because it was very much a local government effort. There were 24 massive caissons, each the size of the Arc de Triomphe, and each of those was manufactured in Senegal, and each of them was filled with rocks to be able to weigh it down, and those rocks were mined in Mauritania. So the last of them was just sunk recently. 24 of these massive caissons sunk to create this island. It's really an engineering marvel. I don't have an engineering or technical background, so to me, it seems magical to see what can be done, but to see it done with such level of involvement from the Mauritanians and the Senegalese was really something.
Wow, this is really something. Thank you very much. I think we would rather make this more interactive. Let's go now to questions. If you have questions, contributions before we go to the next level. Ayo, you have something? Yes. Yeah. And then
yeah, you guys, thanks for all the information about.
do you mind to stand up, introduce yourself?
Okay. My name is Ayo Ayeni, Foreign Investment Network, and very interested in this sector, oil and gas. So the question then is, I have a question and I have a comment. The first one, the question is, seeing as Africa has been under-industrialized for quite a while, right? And then there's this transition from energy, as we know it, oil and gas, to green gases and more eco-friendly energy, right? Now, does that not put Africa at a certain level of crossroad disadvantage where your bid to industrialize based on the more available energy, which is not the eco-friendly green gases as we would want, as green as we would want, to develop to that level where backwards. Now, at what point do we now say to start to adopt new, relatable, eco-friendly energy? At what point do we say, okay, we're going to halt industrialization in this area until there's more work and more affordability with new energies? Does that not put us at a disadvantage? Africa, that is. Then the second thought is things like electric cars, right? Things like electric trains. Now, Africa is behind in those, right? We can't use those because there's no energy, no power, there's no electricity in most African countries, especially Nigeria. I'm sure loads of other countries as well. So we're not even going to be touching any of those assets now, yet, until there's even power to charge them, to power them. So is it not, the comment then is that not being between the devil and the deep blue sea situation? How do you guys fancy that you can roadmap in a way that it helps industrialization, we grow industrially, and then we're still energy eco-friendly. If
Thank you.
that makes any sense at all.
The second question? Yes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Papi Nadal. I'm the Managing Director of Wutiko in the United States. I'm from Alabama, originally from Senegal. I own a business, but a few businesses in Alabama. I'm actually into the energy industry. Just something very simple as a very, easy question to answer, subjectively speaking. I grew up in America, but my foundation of Africanity is very strong. So seeing how these countries develop has given me this survival remorse. When I come here, I compare the standard of living in the United States versus when I go back home. So when I see this great job that you guys are doing, because we know in the energy business, the income is there, and the potential is absolutely amazing. My question to you guys as executives is very simple. What standards are African nations accepting compared to what standard would countries such as the United States accepting? If you were to make a comparison, would you say that those same deals would be applicable here in the United States? And this is where I'm going. As far as the social consequences of the income that's being generated in Senegal, I personally have a nonprofit organization, and just this year I donated about $32,000 of my own money, and the same problem was happening the past 3 years. So for as long as you guys have been in Africa, I'm sure the struggling families that you've been exposed to are still struggling. My question to you guys is, just very objectively speaking, what would you think? Because look, I understand, like when it comes to management and upper management, I run a few companies, and I have a pretty good exposure to negotiation. So sometimes you're kind of between the hard and the rock. Theories are very simple, but in a very theoretical world, like what do you guys honestly think that needs to take place for us to start taking deals in the standards of the United States of America in Africa?
Thank you very much. I understand and I know how you feel. Jeffrey, you want to answer to the two questions, and then Adi with the first one. Oh, so you
Sure.
answer
I'm
yours.
happy to talk about either or both, and then we'll do other questions. Well, first of all, I appreciate both of those questions and comments. I've been working in accounting a long time, and I don't have and I really appreciate your perspective on these things. I think your comment about the devil between the devil and the deep blue sea. I think Africa's actually in a good place right now with the energy transition. People talk about leapfrogging. Africa won't be able to ignore traditional fuels and move right into this renewable space. I think that may be true to a point, but I think it may be a little naive. I think Africa is blessed with great natural resources and should be allowed to tap into that in a clean, cost-effective way. Now, they're actually doing that. When you talk about Senegal, Senegal uses about 19% renewables in its power grid, which is on par with the United States. Other countries like Kenya and Ethiopia have closer to 80%, which are more in line with the Scandinavian countries. So that's pretty amazing. But at the same time, there's massive development that needs to occur. It still has the continent with the most number, when you talked about moderator led with this, most impoverished individuals. In fact, I'm going to read a quote from Macky Sall, which I think helps sum up the dilemma well. I want to make sure I get it exactly, but he said, we call for a fair and just energy transition, which takes Africa's specific needs into account, in particular industrialization and universal access to electricity. More than 600 million Africans are still living in the dark. I mean, that's trouble. And but that number has decreased over the years and has the potential to decrease significantly if managed correctly. This gets to the point that you raised earlier about how we can sort of get these deals on par with what would happen in the West. Because I think the answer is good governance for a lot of these things. But to go back to your point, Africa needs to be able to tap into its natural resources. It needs to be able to use all items in the energy mix to create an appropriate amount of access and affordable access. You know, it's not, I wouldn't, if I owned a Tesla, I'm not sure I would bring it to Dakar with me right now, but I almost ran out of juice in my electric car yesterday in DC. So we don't have enough charging stations either. All of societies are still adapting, but it's going to be a slightly slower effort and evolution in Africa. Now Dakar, Senegal, Mauritania are blessed with these natural gas reserves, but they're coming online next year. And what they have to also do is resist the urge to do the easy thing, which is to export it all to Europe. The easiest thing would be to put it all on LNG tankers, send it off to Europe, cash the checks when they come in. But would that money trickle down to the individuals in, you know, Macky Sall talks about his vision where every Senegalese boy and girl can do their homework by electric light before they go to bed. Like, that is an amazing vision, but if you're exporting all of this resource and just cashing checks, it's not going to happen. That's why it's important. And I'm glad to speak at an investment conference with people who actually know the continent, because it would be a great tragedy if these natural resources were just simply exported to Europe, to the United States, to Asia. We really need to turn these into natural resources. We really need to make this fuel affordable. And, you know, with the engagement of people in the room, other investors across the world, Africa is not a risky continent anymore. I mean, Africa is ready for investment. I mean, how many decades I've been hearing that? People have been making money for years in Africa. So there are billionaires on the African continent. There are people that know how to tap into it. It is a little, you know, if you're an American investor who hasn't worked in Africa, well, it's a, you know, and when I say Africa, Africa is, you know, how many countries? 54 countries. You know, if you're talking about investing in Senegal, you're talking about investing in Nigeria, these are complicated societies. You have to understand, you can't just go in with a big bag of money with a dollar sign on it and say, where am I going to make my money? You have to be sophisticated. But we benefit, we being U.S., benefit by having Senegalese Americans, Nigerian Americans, having a great network of individuals that understand both countries well enough to invest, and I'm hopeful that that will continue to develop the countries going forward. So I'll let my co-panelists speak as well. Chef Sir, that's a great idea. I hope I answered your question, sir.
Sure. Look, I think I'd like to point to your questions. I think that's a really, really important question, because I think we, you know, in the US and in London, we automatically think when we get on the plane and we get to Africa, in particular, I work in Nigeria and Ghana a lot, you automatically think that the system is the same as it is in London and in the UK. But the truth of the matter is, who are we? How ignorant are we to think that the same principle applies there as what it does in country? And I'll give you an example why I think it's not about the system, I think it's culture. And I'll give you an example. When I was working in Ghana, when I lived there, there's a place called Takoradi, which is very close to a place called Abuasi. Abuasi is where all the mining happens. And every Thursday, these young kids, they're called Galamsey. Local language is called Galamsey. And they are the local kids that go from school and they put their shorts on and they go and run in and jump in the pits and they kind of wash gold. They wash the mud of the gold. It's a fantastic image. You just got to watch it. So I'm sitting there. The kids are young. So I'm like 12 to 14. So obviously I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, you're supposed to be in school. Why? No, what are you doing here? So I remember talking to one of the mothers and I was asking her, Madam, I said, you let your kids like just go and go and swim in the water and all the rest of it. And you know, she said something very valuable to me. And I'll tell you what she said to me. She said, the kids come and they do their school in the morning, they come and they earn some small money to feed the family, to buy rice and to keep the lights on at home. I said, fine, that I can understand that. But then what it made me also think about is that that's nothing to do about kind of how we do business. It's all got to do with culture and local understanding. So certain places have a different understanding of what transition is. What I didn't know is the lady was so encouraging that the money that the young boys made, that money was spent to send the young girl to school. They were keen on educating the women. And that's very, very key right now when I talk about culture and local content development, especially in West Africa, because it's one of the, you know, it's the youngest population and smart population as well. So tapping into that is where our kind of strength going forward will kind of help business development and business engagement. And definitely it's not going to be the same as here. We're not expecting it to be, and it shouldn't be, because culturally we're different, you know. But we've got to understand that we also have a big role to play with regards to what our expectations are in our country as well. So, you know, that's my honest opinions and thoughts, because I know everybody watches TV and they see things on TV. It's not really like that, you know. I think people just need to go in the country and see exactly what it's like, you know. Please.
I have a question.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, I have a question behind there. Sorry, we'll come back to you.
Oh, no worries.
Good morning. My name is Anu Sek. I work at Google and I also have my own investment firm. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us this morning. My question is in two parts. So I think I'll first start with like a bit of a story. In the neighborhood where I live in Senegal, Anbelem, we used to have this very beautiful beach. Over the past couple of years, of course, we've seen that there have been more oil rigs that have shown up along those sides. And ultimately, while we can't use those beaches anymore, it's an excellent symbol of development, of course, right? But ultimately, I think that what the biggest challenge is when looking at such symbols, the biggest question that comes to my mind is, how are we ensuring that these are being, sustainably built? How are we ensuring that certain regulations are being put in place to make sure that people aren't being exploited when such projects go up, and ultimately better with governance to make sure that regulation and environmental policies are in place to prevent such actions from happening. And second to that, how can we ensure that the profits from these investments are trickling down to the right people? As the gentleman mentioned earlier, of course, people have been getting richer throughout the continent, but is it the right people? Of course, right? The majority of the people are still poor. So how can we create systems to make sure that as we, create these investments, that the money is trickling down to the right people? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you
Should I-
for
Should I ask mine too?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Isidro Campbell. I work with African Harlem. So it's a follow-up to my brother's question, and I think that he was asking about social responsibility, because and oftentimes this corporation will, the simple answer will be corruption. And you spoke about governance. It seems like it's the same, but I think it's an easy answer to talk about corruption, because we have corruption everywhere. But what is your social responsibility, and what are you willing to do for the people who live there locally?
Thank you very much. Do you want to take the questions?
Sure, absolutely. So let me take the last one first, and I'll talk to our friend from Google as well. My wife works at Google, so I'm very sympathetic and supportive. So first on the social responsibility, you're absolutely right. There is, as a company working in a country, we absolutely have a responsibility there. I mean, truthfully, I'm a little horrified to hear about these oil rigs off the coast of some beach. That sounds terrible to me. And although you take it positive light, which is represent development, to me, the idea that any company is coming there and taking away the enjoyment of the citizens of something like is horrifying. I was born in Hawaii. We take our beaches very seriously. I know that beaches in Senegal are wonderful. So I actually am going to try to do some, maybe we can circle back. I'd like to hear more about that, because that's very troubling to me. All of our efforts are offshore, far offshore, and the idea is, I'll come back to the social responsibility. Oh, this is part of it, is to have no impact on the fishing, is to have no impact on the beach, on the environment, is to be working at international standards to maintain the security and the environmental safety of the citizens and the wildlife and the fish on which people are dependent. So anyway, maybe we can circle back on that. On the in the sustainably built, I mean, a lot of the machines, the offshore platforms are built elsewhere, whether in the US, a lot of them are built in China, Singapore. So they're built to international standards, but I think to your point, and to a large part on the social responsibility, it is up to an engaged government. And that requires the Senegalese government and the Mauritanian government to be a good partner for us, to make sure the regulations are put in place. We as partners need to abide by those regulations. I think one of the things that the government has gotten with Cosmos and BP being the operator, is globally responsible companies that, I mean, BP had a very well-documented challenge in the Gulf of Mexico, to put it mildly, and they learned from that lesson, and because of that are applying the global standards to the projects in Senegal. But it's absolutely the responsibility of the government as well to make sure to hold those companies responsible for those and accountable to those laws, those local laws as well. So when you talk about social responsibility, you know, one of the things about our industry, I mentioned, you know, we're offshore, we've got these highly technical rigs offshore where we need people with engineering backgrounds. I mean, if I set foot a bit on a rig, my value added on a rig is very small, is zero, actually. I could not do any of these technical jobs, but we have highly technical people. Part of our social responsibility is to train Senegalese, is to bring, you know, this education, this Macky Sall Center to life. I will say also in Senegal, in Ghana, in Mauritania, we have 100% local staff. We don't have a bunch of Americans, a bunch of Texans, I love Texans, but you know, we don't have a bunch of Texans sitting in an office there telling folks what's what. We have our Senegalese country manager, is fantastic. Her name is Kadia Njai. Her father was the head of the African Development Bank. She's well known, she knows the country well, she was a city bank before. Very sophisticated, as are a lot of Senegalese that we've worked with, and being able to help that generation not only thrive through jobs, but also that wealth trickle down throughout society is an important part of our project, and to me, an important social responsibility. Now, but that being said, we can't employ every Senegalese. We've been working in Ghana for 15 years. You still only are employing a very small subset, but a lot of our impact goes beyond the jobs. It goes into the taxes, royalties we're paying to the governments of these countries, and we hope and expect those countries and those governments to spend that money wisely. I mean, I'm an American, I'm not always convinced that my government is spending our money wisely, and I'm sure that there's people throughout the countries in which we work that have their concerns as well. But we work hand in hand with these people, but I'd say if you're a Senegalese citizen, hold your government accountable. If you're a Ghanaian citizen, do that as well. We will try and do that as a partner there. So I hope that answered your question to a degree. Before I came to Cosmos, I worked at the State Department, and my job was in the Human Rights Bureau, and I created the first ever Office of Corporate Social Responsibility. And it was to train and encourage companies to do the right thing wherever they're working in the world, whether they're doing manufacturing, agriculture, extractive industries, tech. It was to encourage social responsibility in the countries in which they're operating. So I'm very sensitive to these issues. I think Cosmos is a good partner for that. BP has been a good partner, Talo as well, but it is important to stay, not to just take people at their word, but to hold them accountable.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeffrey. I actually personally am impressed about what Cosmos has been doing, particularly for appointing you with your diplomatic experience as the Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs. Many other companies don't care about these things, right? But for the company to at least recognize that there is value in creating relationship between the business and the people who own the land, and see how they can develop them so that it can be co-ownership. Because really, when you come to talk about investments, you have the oil under the ground, you have the gas under the ground. If you don't have the ability to reach it, it's not useful for even the local people. That's the truth. So we have to work together. Thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, question beforehand. Go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Karine Lavesser from the Delegation for Rapid Entrepreneurship in Senegal government. Indeed, what I've heard before has done an echo to some observation we have done so far. So our main focus is to provide support to entrepreneurs, basically financial and non-financial support. And what we've noticed is that among the portfolio, we have some of them who are addressing this vertical of energy, but there are not so many. In the one hand, we have the fact that among those who address this vertical, they are mainly doing some off-grid solutions, and it's really complicated for them in terms of business model. So most of the time, we would see at some point that they are doing a pilot indeed. And on the other hand, those who are not based in Senegal, who are from the diaspora, who are trying also to tackle these issues and to take the opportunities out of the energy, they will come with solutions, but they don't really fit the market. So for example, as it was mentioned before, electric cars, or how to have a pool of electric like motor to do some transport, etc. And how can we have very specific business cases that make sense for this ecosystem to grow, and that could be helpful for entrepreneurs who want to tackle this vertical, to do it with the right approach and with something that can really be viable on the long term. So I guess there are some use cases you've already identified. Where to find them? Maybe you can share 2 or 3 of them that really make sense for us.
Thank you very much for that question. I'm particularly mentioning the Senegalese in the diaspora, that at least they have shown interest to come together to solve problems at home, which is very important. Do we have one more question so that Abby can take the 2 questions together? Yes, please.
Yes, I'm Tom Kogan from Wutiko Partnerships, and wanted to discuss with you, we're talking at a very high level as far as oil and gas, but really one of the questions that I'd like to hear addressed is opportunities in Africa and in Senegal at more of a specific, grassroots, if you will, level, or small enterprise level. The opportunities with energy, I see some of them purely economic opportunities with solar energy, using solar refrigeration at a grassroots level, refrigerating vegetables, refrigerating fish, things like that. Right now that technology is all, is ready and prepared and stable and economically, viable. Using solar water pumping for irrigation to grow vegetables and things like that, and really grassroots, but really a small enterprise level, and other things for productive use. And also for really, this is an area of investment that could really work well and immediately produce direct results. So shifting from that high level, which is very important, what we're doing, down to this level, could I hear any comments on that?
Okay, thank you. I'd like to address the first question just there. So what's really interesting, and perhaps if I explain the kind of commercial, contractual kind of procedure of how SMEs kind of embed themselves into oil and gas activities. So usually when an oil and gas company come in country, they'll sign something called a production sharing agreement, a joint venture agreement, okay? Which gives you, as I spoke about before, a quota that has to be met locally. Part of that agenda is addressing SMEs in country. So what the actual responsibility of the government and the IOC, the International Oil Company coming in country, is to put together a very extensive list called a PSL, and that's called a preferred supplier list. And what that PSL does is it engages directly with SMEs in the marketplace and effectively creates a database. So if I want graduates, I can go to the database, and the qualifications and the criteria will come up, and then we can hire or recruit or embed them into the oil and gas activities. So what I think with organisations like yourself, it's really important that you discuss with the in-country kind of, not so much government, perhaps local government, and discuss with them, okay, how do we support the preferred supplier list of an oil and energy company? And you'll find they'll be very supportive, because what you're actually doing is you're doing a lot of the work for them, because they have a local content quota that they must legally abide by. So if you come and you give them a solution, you say, look, we have an SME model, this is the framework, this is what it looks like, these are the kind of job specifics, and you'll find they'll be very accommodating, because I know that when I experienced in Ghana and Nigeria, we had something very similar. And our job is to ensure that, as advisors, is to ensure that those technical competencies or those specific sectors in a database so I can call upon. You know, if I need a young engineer, I need a young design tech, or I need somebody else. You know, you're effectively part of the cycle of development for the oil and gas company, and it's also a legal obligation as well. So it's not just a simple thing of, you know, you think that maybe it can be ignored. It can't be ignored. It's very much embedded in a contractual obligation that is taken very seriously from both sides, especially now, because now over the last 10 years we have the power of social media, you know, which has played a very, very big part. If you don't like something, or a local person, somebody doesn't like something, first thing they'll do is go onto YouTube and make a video, you know, and it reaches millions of people. So I think it's, you know, very important that these now obligations are taken very, very seriously, and they're taken by the latter. It's encouraging that you have a system like that. I think it's great, and I think it will definitely work in Senegal in particular. And I think the question regarding kind of SMEs and practicalities of innovation and kind of, I don't call it small medium enterprises, because you may think it's small, but it has a really, really big impact. You know, like refrigeration and solar and small tech. All of these things, you know, I've lived in the village myself, so what seems to be very small and ends up to be quite a large life cycle of an event. So for example, you're talking about refrigeration, let's talk about refrigeration. Okay, so in the hydrocarbon section, the first thing we think about is mobilization. Mobilization of people, whether it be locals, whether it be expats, whether it be international people that come to work for a project. And the second thing is security and assurances. And now, as we've learned, what's the biggest thing of assurances now is food security. Okay? If we can't, as a corporation, secure the interests of our workers locally and expats, we don't really have a project, you know? Because we don't have people to work for us. So you see the small enterprises, these guys are the backbone of our project work. Because we know when we want something to eat, you know, where do we go? When there's no shops in the Boissy region for 3 miles, you know, the best thing is, you know, you get local villagers come and they set up shops, you know, and we encourage them, we support them. We tell them, okay, this is your process and procedure, you know, this is the refrigeration, this is kind of like your supply chain activities, this is where you'll go get fruit and veg. And effectively, as I said before, they become part of the supply chain. So, you know, when we talk about it, it seems like a very small impact, but it's a huge impact, because you're actually feeding about 2,500 people that come in and out, you know, and it's not just supporting the international workers, you're also supporting local people as well, because you're 9 times out of 10 you're in a very hardship location. Hardship location being it may be not in a built-up town, so you know you struggle for small things. But as I said before, I'm very much encouraged about the kind of activity that I've seen going on right now, especially in West Africa in particular.
Thank you. It's important that this point is actually, this question is actually very important, because we can talk about the high level all the time and don't come down to the low level, because at the end of the day, it has to come down to the low level so that it ends up on the table, people can be able to eat and live a better life. That's the whole idea. And before we go into the opportunities for Africa in the area of investment, we'd like to talk about the transition. Right now is climate week in America here. So what is our position as in Africa? And I also would like to let you know that at the end of this session, we have to have a communique that will serve as an advice, right, to the various governments, the government of America, and also the African governments. And that reminds me of the initiative that Barack Obama declared 2013 in Tanzania when he visited. It was Power for Africa. And on that basis is what we at Foreign Investment Network are hosting an event on Friday afternoon at the MAD Center, Museum and Art Center. Looking at the challenges that has come through 2013 when he initiated this, and to today, what has gone, what developments has come up there. We're talking about climate change today. We're talking about energy transition, and yet many Africans are still in darkness. So, Jeffrey, do you want to touch on the issue of transition?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think one of the things we need to recognize is that Africa is faced with a dilemma, they're faced with a trilemma. And that is, what we need is, we need energy security, we need affordable energy, and all of those things are realistic. The World Bank, the African Development Bank, the IMF, international governments, private sector investors, if they see the opportunities there and they seize on those opportunities in an energy mix that brings Africa the development that it needs without its carbon footprint significantly. If all of the natural gas across the continent, all the massive fields, Senegal, Mauritania, Mozambique, Egypt, all these were exploited, Africa would have massive increase in electricity and natural resources, with only impacting the global carbon footprint slightly. So when the West comes to Africa and complains about climate change, Africa can rightly say, we haven't been the problem. And for you, those governments, those countries who have been developing for generations are going to tell us we can't develop. I think that African governments rightly can come back and say that's not right. It's not just. It's not economic justice. It's not just energy transition. And energy poverty is not being addressed adequately by a lot of these international players. So I think it's that trilemma we need to address. The private sector is there, the government seem positioned and ready, and African voters, and African citizens, and African businesses have to work together. I think this goes hand in glove with us looking at what opportunities are there. You asked about real, like what can we do? Not like, oh, oil, gas, all this big. Like, there are projects that will be partnering with the oil and gas, especially the gas sector. There's fertilizer opportunities. Well, not all of us around here are Wutiko Dangote, who can drop $1 billion on a facility. If you are, congratulations, more power to you. If you're not, there are other opportunities. If you're looking for where they are, I just got back from Ghana, and we have a U.S. embassy there, has a commercial section, and they're all the time looking for opportunities for American or U.S.-based companies to invest in the country. When I talk to the ambassador there, our U.S. ambassador is a good friend of mine, she talks to the president and the finance minister all the time about this is Ghana, but it's the same all over. Where are there opportunities for investment for Americans and for anyone overseas, truthfully? If you talk to the embassy, you look at the commercial section, you look at their website, you reach out to them, they can talk to you about things that could be in need at this point. I mentioned fertilizer. There's no shortage of technical know-how that people can bring from their, from Alabama, Senegal. You can bring your expertise there and an understanding of Senegal as well as you do. So I think the opportunities are there, the interest is there, and the time is right. So thanks for having me today.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a closing statement really, and to reiterate what my panelist just said. Look, there's lots of opportunities, and the opportunities don't have to be overly exasperated with billions and millions of dollars. It could be small grassroots levels opportunities. For example, logistics and fertilizers and in the agricultural sector. We forget that the oil and energy sector, yes, as a whole, is highly operational and technical. And there's lots of equipment and it's big money. However, there's a piece that surrounds that, which is kind of infrastructure, development, housing, kind of irrigation systems. So I think, look, the opportunities are there. And now more than ever, because of living in a post-COVID world, all of these things are readily available online, and the support is there now. Because, as I said, we have social media to thank for that. So anyway, look, it's been a pleasure to speak with you all very openly. And we're around, so if you have any other questions, just come and speak to us privately. We're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey Clear. Thank you very much for your contributions. I think you stand to be the face for Africa as far as this area is concerned. Thank you for Cosmos for doing the best you can for Africa. And we believe that you will do more investments in Africa. And thank you, Nana, Abby. Thank you for your contribution. As we meet on towards step 5, that is at how is artificial intelligence going to help in power production in Africa. So we have also about 6 billion years, but in technology. So we have to use the money in technology to invest in power so that Africans can have better access to power. On this note, I'd like to thank every distinguished that is here. Thank you very much for your time, for sitting here. And also, would like to have your contribution, please. Mention it to the organizers, or you can direct it to any of the speakers after this event. It is important that we know that we are all here because of one reason. We have interests of Africa in mind. And we are here in America because America has been doing a lot. I just mentioned the issue since 2013, when Obama mentioned it. And I have numbers of contacts of the American embassies, like you said, of the trade, commercial. I'm happy to share. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. We hope to see you and meet you again. We are open.